Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting for December 11th, 2023. The time now is 7 o'clock and we will open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Ralston, would you take a roll call of council members present?
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Paula?
Here.
Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallensack?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. And also present at tonight's meeting are Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Major, Clerk of Council Cassie Rolson, Law Director Melissa Papora, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and Finance Director Nick Roman. Council, the first thing on our agenda this evening will be the approval of the meeting minutes for the November 27th regular council meeting and the December 4th committee of the whole meeting.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. I move for approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on November 27th of 2023 and the committee of the whole meeting on December 4th, 2023 as presented to us.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, meeting minutes for November 27th, regular meeting, and December 4th, committee of the whole meeting have been accepted. Council, also this evening, before we begin the meeting, we need to add items 165, 166, 168, and 169 to tonight's agenda. Item 167 will not be on our agenda this evening. The administration has requested that we send that back to them for the time being. So can I get a motion to add these items?
Mr. President.
Mr. Horniak.
So move. Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Counselor, any objections? Hearing no objections, these items have been added to this week's agenda. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to the mayor
For an appointment.
for an appointment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And council, you have the correspondence before you through the fire department. And today I'll be asking for you to approve the appointment of Mr. Thomas Saunders of 7255 Corduroy Road, Oregon, Ohio, to the position of Battalion Chief in the Oregon Fire Department. You will be placed at step 3, grade 39A, hourly rate $41 and small cents, which is an annual salary of $102,336.52. The appointment will be effective as of December 15th, 2023, and I would ask for your concurrence in the appointment once again of Mr. Thomas Saunders to the fire department as battalion chief.
Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of Thomas Saunders to Battalion Chief of the Fire Department effective December 15th, 2023.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Counselor, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Mr. Mayor, council does concur with the position of battalion chief for Thomas Saunders.
Thank you. Thomas Saunders is here, and we usually ask for about a 20-minute deal, but we're going to reduce that down to about 18. But do you have anything we want to say? Yeah.
No, I do appreciate your appointment, approval. It's very something I've dreamed about, being on the fire department, a full-time position, such as the battalion chief, and worked a long time, doing the same kind of work, elsewhere. And, now is the perfect opportunity for me to move. And I'll have confidence in myself to take that.
Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Congratulations.
we have a meeting that'll last another hour and a half or so, and you guys are all welcome to stay or leave. Yeah.
Okay, council, our first item for discussion this evening is, or for passage this evening is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Paul Roman. This is item 162, 2023, which we did discuss at last week's Committee of the Whole. Mr. Roman, you have anything to add to this at all?
No, Mr. President, and I know there was a press article, explained it well, so no, I have nothing else.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Roman on item 162? Hearing none, I will assign item 162, 2023 as ordinance 162, 2023, and ask Mr. Olson to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for funding from the Federal Highway Administration for the engineering, design, and construction of LUC Corduroy Road Bridge Replacement, PID 119725, and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 162 of 2023 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Mr. Olson, will you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 162, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for passage is item 163, 2023, which is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins. This was also discussed at last week's Committee of the Whole meeting. Chief Mullen, I don't think you were at that meeting last week. Do you have anything to add to this?
I don't have anything to add other than it was for 6 door closures. That was an oversight. And we built the station, and then had to be added later, at a later date.
Thank you, Chief. Council, do you have any questions for Chief Mullins regarding item 163? Hearing none, I will assign item 163, 2023 as ordinance 163, 2023, and ask Mr. Olson to read to the record.
Authorizing the mayor, fire chief, and finance director to sign change order number 2 final with Midwest Contracting, Inc., 1428 Albin Road, Holland, Ohio, in an amount of a net contract addition of $3,918 for additional work related to the Oregon Central Fire Station 2021 project and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 163 of 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Second by Mr. Wallenzeck.
Mr. Drake.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Olson, will you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 163, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Item 164, 2023 is also presented by the mayor and Assistant Chief Mark Mullins. Chief, do you have anything additional to add to this item?
No, I don't have anything additional to add. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions regarding item 164, 2023? Hearing none, I will assign item 164, 2023 as ordinance 164, 2023, and ask Mr. Olson to read the record.
Authorizing the mayor, city administrator, and finance director to enter into a contract with the Oregon Part-Time Firefighters Association and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 164 of 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Second by Mr. Wallenzeck. Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck. Ms. Ralston, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 164, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next item that we added this evening is item 165, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Paul Roman. And I will defer to Mr. Roman, but I hope you're all aware that we did get a revision on this particular item. I think Mr. Roman had to add another chemical to this ordinance, actually.
That's correct.
So I'll let you, I'll defer to you, Mr. Roman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. This, well, the ordinance is to purchase chemicals for the water treatment plant. When we went out to bid, it was to bid for 3 particular chemicals. Pebble Lime we received no bids. And whenever that happens, and it's rare, but when it does happen, it's a problem, obviously, but you can call and get quotes. We are allowed to do that. When you advertise your bids, receive no bids, we do have the right to get quotes. But on Pebble Lime, it is pretty much one sole vendor in our area, and that is Carmeuse. They're the only ones that provide that. They did provide us a quote right away. That was in the exhibit in the original ordinance as we drafted it, but we didn't have Pebble Lime as the purchase in the ordinance itself. So that's what we revised. We added Carmeuse lime to the ordinance itself. So, and then the other thing is when we drafted it, we had the old format of using contracts. When you purchase chemicals, they are pretty much with purchase orders, and it's multiple orders throughout the year. They really don't sign contracts. So there's a little bit different. So the ordinance allows for purchase orders throughout the year with the unit prices listed in the exhibit. So with the 3 that are listed, it's Chemtrade for liquid aluminum sulfate, JCI, Jones Chemicals for liquid caustic soda, Carmeuse for lime. We do list all the other chemicals that we renewed from the 22 price to 23 price. One thing that Doug and Steve do out at the water plant, they do call other plants, see what the changes are in prices. If we don't see anything changing, or if it's going up, then a lot of times we'll try to renew, and that's what they did. So they listed that, showed the differences, showed the use of the chemicals in that exhibit, which is informative. That's why I was going through my ordinances notes for tonight. I realized that Carmeuse wasn't in there, and that's why I made the change. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments on item 165, 2023? Hearing none, I will assign item 165, 2023 as ordinance 165, 2023, and ask Ms. Rolson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to issue purchase orders to Chemtrade Chemicals US LLC, 90 East Halsey Road, Suite 200, Parsippany, New Jersey. Jones Chemicals, Inc., JCI, Inc., 18,000 Payne Street, Riverview, Michigan, and Carmeuse Lime, Inc., 11 Stanwyck Street, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for 2024 water, wastewater treatment chemicals and materials bid and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 165, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Rolson, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 165, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Our next item is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Law Director Melissa Pepora. Item 166, 2023, and I will defer to Ms. Pepora.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an annual agreement with the Lucas County Public Defender Commission for counsel to represent indigent defendants charged with violations of the municipal ordinances or state statutes that have the possibility of jail time. This agreement does allow the operations of the court to run smoothly for disposition of both the criminal and traffic cases. This agreement goes from January 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2024. The amount is $39,692. I can tell you for the last 10 plus years, this amount has remained the same. If anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Council, any questions or comments regarding item 166?
Mr. President.
Mr. Drake?
Ms. Purpura, if we didn't pass this, who would represent them then?
Mr. President, Mr. Drake,
Ms. Purpura?
it would be where the court would have to have attorneys that would be willing to be appointed. In that case, you would have to have a certain number of defense attorneys that are willing to sit in the courtroom waiting to get appointed. Many times you'll see that in common pleas court. That would not be efficient. And the time frame in which we have to dispose of these criminal cases or traffic cases would not occur.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Council, any other questions or comments on item 166? Hearing none. I will assign item 166, 2023 as ordinance 166, 2023 and ask Ms. Ralston to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with the Lucas County Public Defender Commission to be in effect from January 1 of 2024 to December 31st, 2024, for our council to represent indigent defendants charged with violations, of municipal ordinances of the city of Oregon.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake.
I move for item 166-2023 as an ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
Second?
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Ralston, you take a roll call vote of council for ordinance 166.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pauloff?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wollenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 166, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next item, 168, 2023, and item 169, 2023, will be presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Finance Director Nick Roman. And Mr. Roman, you want to talk about both these items?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So at the end of last year, we were authorized to advance funds, basically loaning from one fund to another in order to cover negative balances for these two projects that we had going on, one in Cedar Point Development Fund and one in the Street Construction Fund. We have received all of those funds back from the loan amounts that we had. So now I'm asking for approval to return the advanced, which is a loan fund, back to the original fund.
Thank you, Mr. Roman.
Thank you.
Council, any questions on either item 168 or 169 for Mr. Roman? Hearing none, I will assign item 168, 2023 as ordinance 168, 2023 and ask Ms. Ralston to read in the record.
Authorizing the return advance of funds to the income tax fund from the Cedar Point Development Fund and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President,
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Wollenzak.
thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 168 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wollenzak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mr. Ralston, take a roll call vote of council on ordinance 168.
Mr. Wollenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 168, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Regarding item 169, 2023, I will assign that as ordinance 169, 2023 and ask Ms. Ralston to read the record.
Authorizing the return advance of funds to the general fund from the Street Construction Fund and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Wollenzak.
thank you, Mr. President. Again, I move for passage of ordinance number 169 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wollenzak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mr. Ralston, will you take a roll call vote of council on ordinance 169?
Mr. Wollenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 169, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Council, this will conclude items for discussion this evening. And now we will now move to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. And no report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing to report, except we do have a couple of items under further business before council, and
You want to do that now?
we can if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, council. I'm going to ask Cassie to bring up the map, which she has up right now. So the first item is under CRA area modification. As you know, there's a Community Reinvestment Act area that covers the area around the town center. And this was put in place some time ago. I'm not sure exactly what year this was put into place, but we did find out very recently that for the residential portion that you can see, and it's tilted here, but you see Pickle Road, that's off to the right-hand side. Everything north of where the word Pickle Road is and up to the green area is in the CRA area right now. What we're looking to do is carve that out, and the ordinance, we'd plan to bring the ordinance back to city council next week for passage. The reason for this is because new homeowners for residential TIF areas, new homeowners would be entitled to a 100% CRA tax abatement for 15 years. I do know as part of the model that TIF revenue for that residential area was anticipated for some of the infrastructure costs that were already incurred. So as you know, and you're well aware, the road construction has been completed from Pickle to the new roundabout. And then of course that ring road off of Pickle Road and the ring road just north of that. So those are all costs that are already incurred. I believe that total amount that was bonded for was somewhere around the $5 million range. So we're paying debt service on that now. And as Paul mentioned earlier, we are anticipating building that road, we call it Road F. That's the east side of the Kmart property. That's also part of that bond issuance from back when it was first issued. So I guess what I'm getting at is the CRA area modification would carve that portion out of the CRA area so that we could establish a TIF district for that residential area and capture the TIF revenue without the for lack of a better word, call it a threat of the not receiving the revenues from that TIF area. So if everybody had property tax abatements of 100%, we wouldn't get anything for 15 years. And we were anticipating that as part of the model of paying off the infrastructure costs long term. So I hope I explained that well enough for everybody. That makes sense. If anybody has any questions, please let me know, but we will plan on bringing that ordinance back next week. And it does have to be passed before the end of the year. And the reason is because they're closing on planning on closing on the properties and starting construction at the start of next year. So the TIF district will follow up next year sometime. It could be anytime next year, but the TIF district will plan on establishing in 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Council, any questions or comments from Mr. Major on this?
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I do have a counsel of that with setting aside the residential property to this, to the developer and the individuals who will be buying, building, and residing in that residential community by doing the CRA at a later time with closing prior, does that create any implications or any issues that we have to deal with that?
I'm sorry if I'm understanding.
Does this impact the homeowners or the developers outside of the 15-year set aside? Is there any other impact to who would be living in the area for this CRA not going through that residential piece as the rest of it?
No, not that I'm aware of. And I would say that originally when we first spoke to the developer, we told them up front, we were very clear with them that we have these lots for sale. We'd like to, get them to closing, and so that they can start construction quickly, because we're anticipating the TIF revenues, establishing a TIF district and anticipating the TIF revenues help pay for the infrastructure costs that have already been incurred. We're very clear with them on that. From upfront, from day one, that was the number one driver for us getting to the point where we're at now. So,
Okay. So it's completely transparent to the developer and will be made so to the owners, if you will.
correct.
Perfect, thank you.
I would like to
Thank you,
expand a
Mr.
little
Mayor.
bit on that.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. We had no knowledge to anticipate that the CRA would cause that to trigger that 15-year abatement program. But, and in that conversation, we did talk, we're speaking to the developer, was Nick Ide, and saying that without the TIF revenue, we could not market those lots for that cost. So it was very clear. So even if we would come, I told Joel and I had a conversation, fairly lengthy conversation to address that, and said, well, simply put, if they would come back and say, well, we were counting on that, so we would back out of that deal. We just couldn't do that. It would be like a free giveaway. They'd be getting a discount and a discount on top of the discount. And no one anticipated that. We were both there at all the conversations, and it was very clear. The only thing that wasn't clear is I don't know when it instituted the 15-year abatement program, but it came to us later that we knew that they were eligible for that. Otherwise, we would have specified that at the time.
Really.
But we were very clear, and they knew the cost, and they knew the TIF was of the utmost importance to us. And through this whole project, the TIF, a lot of people don't understand the TIF. It's a great product for us. We could not have had the town center without it. Regardless we get critiqued on the timely fashion it takes to get that developed, and we're working on some new prospects there. As soon as today, we were working very a lot on new possibilities there. But the key thing is, had we not purchased that property, we would never have any type of town center, because it would have already been developed. So even if it took us 20 years to do it now, we still have the ability to do it. Had we not purchased that property, we would have never had the ability ever again to do it. So I know it gets a little frustrating sometimes. A lot of things changed over the last few years of how businesses do business, what happened with the economy, but we will be able to develop it in time. And we'll be able to develop with this TIF funding source, which is really an amazing tool for us, and will give us hope for the future. But we don't want to take risks of doing something that isn't. We'd rather take a time to develop something we're proud of versus something that we're ashamed of.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Council. Ms. Purpura. Oh, we do? It sounded all encompassing to me.
There's one other.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, council. The other item is the establishment of a TIF district. So, excuse me. So for the entire town center area, there is actually only one TIF district that has been established to this point. And that is for the apartment complex area that was sold, and that TIF district was established late last year in 2022. The rest of the TIF area has not been created yet. So like I mentioned before, we are planning to establish a residential TIF district for the lots that we just talked about. But there are two parcels, and this is allowable, and this, I believe, and it does spell this out in your packet, in the memo in your packet. This brings the highest value for us, for Oregon, for the city, for getting revenues in for from this TIF area that we're talking about. So there are two parcels in question here, and it would just be a two-parcel TIF. And again, this does have to be passed this year because the tax valuation changes take effect next year, since these two new construction projects were just finished, and that would be the car wash and the gas station, the S&G store on the corner of Coy and Navarre, and the other one on Navarre at, I believe it's 3220 Navarre Avenue. So that would be the Whitewater Car Wash. So those two parcels would be a standalone two-parcel TIF district. That is allowable. New construction adds highest value, obviously. When you demo and rebuild something newer and bigger, it's going to bring more value. And the TIF revenues can only be brought in based on the increased valuation of that property. So if there's a valuation of $100,000 on a parcel, and the new construction brings in, has a new valuation of $150,000, that $50,000 taxable revenue would then come to the city, not the full 150, just to use round numbers. So that's why, since those were finished this year, it makes sense for us to establish a two-parcel TIF so we can capture the revenue from those two parcels. And then as we move along, there may be other ones like this, but this is an allowable, excuse me again, this is allowable, and this adds the highest value for us. So that's why we're proposing this. It does need to be done by the end of the year. If not, then we lose that increased valuation, that TIF revenue that we would otherwise be gaining.
Mr. President?
Mr. Mayor?
And one thing I'd like to add to that is that, and I remember on those of you who went to the candidates forum, one of the candidates had said how we got to be careful with the TIF because it raised people's property taxes. That is not true. Their property taxes would be the same whether we had the TIF or not. It's just where the tax dollars go to us versus other entities. So there is no additional cost to anybody involved in the TIF, except we get more of the tax dollars versus the county and the school system.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, any other questions or comments regarding this item, this issue? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Major. Ms. Pepora?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Mr. Roman?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenczak?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the administration again, and Mr. Roman in particular. This evening, we did have our third budget hearing for the service department, very detailed. Mr. Roman does a great job every year laying out the expenditures within his department, so I want to thank him for that. We were able to wrap up the final session, but I am requesting that we call a finance committee hearing for next Monday, December 18th at 6:30. It'll just be a review. So if there's any last minute additions, or if there's any questions that the council has for the administration, they can be asked before it becomes or comes to the floor of council. So I am setting a finance committee hearing again next Monday, December 18th, 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mr. Davish?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Pauloff?
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing from my standing committee, but the Winter Wonder Lights map is out. And right now, there are over 165 shares, which went up by 35 in the last hour. So it's really taken off. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Mr. Horniak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to thank Mr. Mazur and the administration. The CRA modification and the TIF district establishment is something we've been talking about, needing to move on that by the end of the year. We did request that we made that part of the further business tonight, just so we had an opportunity to review, have a week of talking about that before we had to move on it next week with there being no committee of the whole between now and then. So I do want to appreciate all their work on that, and also to Mr. Wallenczak with kind of directing the finance and budget review process as well. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. And I have nothing for my standing committee, although I echo what Mr. Horniak just said. Mr. Wallenczak, you did a fine job on these budget hearing meetings. They're a little tedious.
I thank you, but the administration did a good job and laid
Yes,
out
they did. They
a
did.
good plan. Every week they had detail what we needed, and, you know, without their work, it wouldn't get done. Thank you, though.
We have nobody signed in to speak before council. Therefore, I will seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Council, any objections? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.